Hey, welcome to the New Home Insights podcast by John Burns Real Estate Consulting. I'm Dean Wehrli, your host. Each episode, we're going to bring you some of the best minds in the housing business talking about some fascinating topics or trend or innovation or issue, just like the one you're about to listen to. Enjoy. Hey, welcome to New Home Insights, the John Burns Real Estate Consulting podcast about the U.S. housing market, which lately really has kind of become about the COVID-19 situation and all of the disruptions that have come in its wake. Today, we're going to discuss how consumers and manufacturers in the building product space are reacting to this new COVID-19 world, I guess, and how this might impact the housing market now and into the future. To help us do that, we have Zach Williams from Venveo. Zach and Venveo help some of the biggest and best companies in the building products world figure out how to market their products and understand their consumers. First, though, Zach, can you tell us a little bit about your background and your company and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited. I've been listening for a long time now, and I think the content that you and your company puts together is excellent. But as far as Venveo is concerned, we've been around since 2007, which was a great year for building products. But we have a team of about 35 people. We focus specifically on the building products, building construction space. We're also almost exclusively focused on the digital side of things. So how are we helping our clients drive demand for the different players in the building products channel? So we use a number of different digital tactics to do it. But at the end of the day, let's understand what the different audiences in the channel are doing, and then how do we help position products and get the message out there in a way that turns into sales. So
kind of, I guess, methodologically, if that's the right word, what are the tools you use? How do you know what you know and do what you do?
It's a good question. So, for all intents and purposes, we are a digital marketing agency. The difference is we view digital marketing things, whether it's email or social or SEO or paid traffic, whatever it might be, or even your website for that matter. We view those as tools versus the endpoint, because they're all, frankly, just tools that we use to find better ways to communicate with people. So we will help our clients figure out and say, okay, well, am I marketing to a homeowner? Am I marketing to a contractor or to, let's say, an architect? And what's the most effective way for us to deliver a message and then turn that message into actual, tangible dollars? So that means sometimes passing that through to a dealer or pushing to retail or pushing to e-commerce. There's a bunch of different ways our clients distribute and sell their products. For us, it's finding, okay, let's understand what we know about the audiences based upon prior expertise and knowledge and market research on our end on what's happening in the channel. And then we find the best tactics to do it. So I like to think that we're tactic and, ambidextrous. It's really about what's the most effective way to get our clients' audiences, their customers, to take action and move the needle. Does that answer your question?
It does actually perfectly. Yeah. So let's start with the big picture. How is COVID-19, at least to date, changing consumer behavior? I mean, that really in terms of sort of, I guess, let's start with online shopping for homes. What's the impact so far?
So if we focus specifically on homes, we've got a number of clients who are in the building product space, the dealer space, and then even some builders. So we're trying to monitor search demand, meaning demand on Google specifically is a great indicator. We can monitor different data points on Google to see what in the world is happening, and then we have real firsthand data around what we see that's actually happening on different websites that we control. What we're seeing right now in the midst of COVID is there's actually a tremendous uptick in volume when it comes to the research process around homes and products within homes. Now, I know we have to separate the difference between, let's say, renovation. I'm renovating a home, or I'm refurbishing, or I'm improving it, versus buying a new home. The data we're seeing across the board is almost an increase across the board in all different sectors. The reason being is, and as you guys know, everyone's at home and they're stuck in a house that they either A, they like, or B, that they don't like and they want to improve, or they want to move to a new home. And so those two things are really amplifying the research process that, at least from what we're seeing on our data points. The challenging thing that we're running into, I'm sure we'll talk about this in a little bit, but not everyone can cross the finish line and actually make a purchase today because we're stuck at home. So we're in this really unique stage or really unique situation where the research process of new homes and products around the home has been escalated and accelerated because of the environment we're in, right?
Yeah, and that will be. We'll talk about that in a minute too. But it is that kind of $1 million question: is how is this intent to spend this money on the other side, or is it just sort of they have time in their hands and they're thinking about it and dreaming about it?
That's a great question, and I would love to know the answer to that. If you figure that out, will you let me know?
Well,
The thing we are seeing though is that for the product categories that, and I'll say this, the product categories that are very DIY focused. Now I know builders don't necessarily care about that necessarily, but for product categories where they're very DIY focused, we are seeing an incredible increase in volume of search demand, search intent, and on top of that, even purchases. So even in the midst of COVID, where there's a lot of economic uncertainty, we're seeing huge gains from a revenue standpoint for clients that sell in the e-commerce space and have a DIY component to it. So to me, as somebody who looks at the broader spectrum of the housing industry, to me that's somewhat encouraging, because that doesn't mean that people aren't buying. People are actually buying, but the people that are buying aren't having people come in and do the work. They're trying to do the work themselves. So when America, quote unquote, opens back up again, the big question is, well, all that other research that's happening right now, is that going to actually turn into sales because people have done a ton of research today?
yeah,
Right.
yeah. And for those of you out there, by the way, Zach has a great podcast himself from Venveo, talking about marketing for building product manufacturers. And on that, so I wanted to ask you, I heard some, I've been listening to some, and you mentioned that Windows searches have just skyrocketed. Are there some examples like that of specifically what folks are looking at right now in this COVID-19 world?
Yeah, I mean, I could go through almost every single product category in the building construction space, building product space, and share. But if you look at Windows, for example, we're seeing, depending upon Windows, and I say search intent, it's the amount of search volume on Google for specific terms. So if we look at that, like we look at Windows, we're seeing 4,000% increases during COVID. Now, if we look at it, and we're like, well, why in the world is it happening? It's because people are in their homes, they're stuck in their house, and they don't like their windows, right?
Yeah.
But we're seeing that for flooring. We're seeing that for roofing. We're starting to see an uptick for exterior products as well when it comes to things like hardscaping or landscaping. We're starting to see some uptick there versus the past few weeks because it's getting warmer. And if you look at things like paint as well, like paint is through the roof. Paint searches are just blowing up. So the thing we're telling our manufacturing clients is like, hey, you've got to position your product around how easy is it to install, that kind of thing, because that's how you're going to close the loop on that sale.
Is it too early yet? Or are you spotting any trends in the building product space that you're seeing? For instance, are you seeing any kind of differences between more affordable maybe and more expensive products yet? Or is it too early?
That's a great question. We're not seeing any kind of difference between affordability around cost. For example, if you look at like pergolas tend to be a little bit more of a pricey product. We're seeing across the board search demand and actual purchases in that category if they've got a easy to install component to it. The thing we are seeing though is that regardless of price, we're seeing demand. Really, the world we live in right now in the midst of COVID is it's not cost of price or cost in terms of money. It's more cost and time and ease. So the easier your product is to install from a DIY standpoint, if we're just looking at manufacturing, the more successful you're doing right now.
Yeah, I was just going to say that seems completely counterintuitive, doesn't it? You have time on your hands. It's almost like now is the time to maybe tackle the big jobs, but that's not showing up yet.
We are seeing some larger project purchases. Yes, now I will say we're seeing research increase across the board. This is commercial, this is residential, this is complex products. I'm looking at purely from the standpoint of when I say actual purchases. I'm looking at if you've got a DIY component, you can actually ship a product and you can purchase online. We're seeing a lot of volume increase there from a pure sales standpoint today.
How about in terms of, you mentioned paint. So paint's up. Are there any other kind of trends you might be seeing in terms of the products that some are doing better or worse on getting more attention or less attention so far?
That's a good question. Exterior products, we're not seeing quite as much yet. Now I say that like we've been trying to monitor this like almost daily. It's hard to do it daily, but you can definitely do it weekly. if we look at paint, for example, that's a good example because interior paint and DIY paint has increased and skyrocketed from day one. But exterior, like painting the outside of your home, like that's lagged behind. And so it's because frankly, it's been a little bit cold. But the last couple of days, as we've been monitoring things, we're starting to see a little bit of an increase there. We're also looking at things like, frankly, the complexity of exterior paint, if we're just using that one as an example. But the other thing too is if we look at, from your audience's standpoint, building, actual builders, one thing we're looking at and seeing is that everyone is really in this high research phase. That's like the world we live in, is everyone's researching. There's a lot of search demand and search volume for things like home floor plans or home design plans. And even on top of that, we're seeing a little bit of an interesting micro set of data around people searching for builders near them. And we're even seeing that specifically on mobile as well as voice search as well when we break down the data a little bit further. So I look at those as like, and I don't know if this makes sense, but I'm looking at those as digital indicators. I'm not an economist. Like I have no idea what the economy is going to do. But the thing I like about the data that we're seeing is that it's all showing search intent. It's showing demand. The question is, will people close the loop and actually make a sale once we come through it?
Yeah. I listen to you. I get more encouraged, honestly. I hope realistically, but because it does seem like if there is just a fatalism out there, they wouldn't be searching. They wouldn't be looking into what they're going to do, even if it's 2, 3, 4 months or 6 months away. It seems like that is. I find what these trends you're seeing to be encouraging, but I'm an optimist.
I do too. No, I do too. What's interesting is, we manage a lot of advertising, hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of dollars of advertising online. The thing we look at is for our clients, that are in these different categories, a good majority of them see the opportunity because number one, and if you're really interested in this is there's a lot more demand, for these products and for research happening online. But a lot of companies are scared about the uncertainty. And so many companies are pulling back on advertising. And so for the manufacturers and different companies in the space that we work with, we're telling them to double down because it's underpriced attention. More people are searching, fewer people competing. Yeah. That means the price is actually decreased,
Yeah. So folks are, that makes perfect sense. Is there a lot more folks out there doing more searching? It does seem counterintuitive to pull back your outreach to those folks because now the time you have their attention. I was just curious though, is there, so you mentioned earlier that they're sitting back at their homes, they find, I don't know, maybe they it's like, gosh, my home is way uglier than I realized. Do you think that really is what's going on? So they're motivated by having spent more time in their homes now, and they've made a decision to fix that?
I mean, I can't get inside the head of an actual homeowner, but I think from the indicators we see, and especially the terms that are being searched for, I think people are in their homes and there's an element of restlessness that they're like, I don't want to be cooped up in here. I don't like the amount of space I have in my home. I want a bigger home, or I want to improve my home. And that's just the anxiety and restlessness that people are living with today. I think that's amplifying things. The fact that we have actual search data and then purchase data to support that, to me, I mean, it feels the same way. Like I was at my house the other day and I just got a hold of this data on pergolas, and I get home and the first thing my wife says is she's like, I've got to get out of the house, and we have a small backyard. She's like, but it's blazing hot in the mornings. She's like, do you know of any DIY pergolas that we can install? I'm like, you just proved my point. Like, and so and my response is, I don't know if I'm not sure, I'll have to look into that, but like, cause it's my wife. But I think, I think that people, for the most part, I think there is a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of still optimism around where the economy may go, but there is a lot of purchases happening too.
Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, we're all working from home now. I actually worked from home previously, but folks are working from home and paying more attention and in their house more. And I'm telling you right now, you remember puke green carpets back in the day? I'm realizing our carpet is puke blue and it's nasty, and I want it to go away. So that'll be an impact. Tell me if this is outside your wheelhouse, but we mentioned about people are looking at DIY, and that's sort of associated with suburbia.
Hmm.
And we've been debating internally in here if COVID-19 might have an impact in terms of enhancing the appeal of suburban against urban, just sheerly because it's easier to function in this new world in suburbia, in this kind of closed up environment. I mean, honestly, tell me if that's just way outside, but do you have any sense of that at all yet?
I don't. Now, I can say, I don't really know about from a demand standpoint around suburbia versus, urban areas, but I can say if we look at search intent around, let's say residential, commercial, multifamily, when it comes to actual search terms online, we're seeing upticks and we're seeing increases and decreases in certain categories. So, like, frankly, I don't know, but it's something I'm also really interested in because a lot of the manufacturers we work with, they target all of those different categories. And so the big
Yeah.
question for us is, well, where are we going to try to push our message and how are we going to try to deliver that depending upon where the market goes? But that's one that we're trying to keep a really close pulse on. But candidly, I don't really know yet. I don't.
Yeah, and same for us. By the way, it kind of makes intuitive sense, but it depends on just how forward thinking folks are, buyers and renters are going to be after this. Is that will they be thinking something like, well, for the next time, maybe we should be in some place that's got a little more space, or a little, even if it's just a little more space in the surrounding environment, and the world might be a little easier.
I think that's interesting thought to consider is, right now I'm so thankful I have a backyard. I have friends who live in the city and they can't leave their apartments. I'm wondering if there's not going to be I want to be outside for the next, pandemic, because hopefully there's no more pandemics, but I want to be outside because I've literally lived inside my apartment forever for, however long they've been in
Yeah.
there. And they're like, I've got to get out of here. And so there's
Yeah.
almost like a whiplash effect of like, I'm going to move out to the middle of nowhere because I can't be in the city anymore,
Yeah, just same though. We have friends I'm in Northern California, and we have friends in much more urban environments than say San Francisco. And yeah, I mean, you're shamed if you walk down the street because you should be and you're holed up in your tiny little apartment with, or sometimes if they're younger, with multiple roommates. Our kids have a friend who's in with, I think it's 4 or 5. She works at Google, no less, and she still has like 4 roommates in the city of San Francisco, and it's
Wow.
just been brutal for her. Yeah. So let's check. Let's switch over to take some specifically new home sector kind of topics, and how do these behaviors impact new home construction specifically? For instance, let's start with something that we've talked a lot about here on this podcast, and we will for sure again soon, which is design. Are
Mm.
you seeing more research into home designs that might be attributed to COVID induced behavior?
Absolutely. Yeah. If we look at social indicators as well, like we haven't really talked about Instagram at all right now, or even Pinterest, across the board, we're seeing not only, 20 to 100% more engagement on these social channels, specifically around research, but home plans as well. Excuse me. We're seeing that across the board on websites, on social. People are researching and looking for new designs and new home plans. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, people, again, they're stuck in their homes and they're thinking about, well, I don't like this about my current space. I don't like this about my current home. And the different social media accounts that we manage, we're seeing, really, really high engagement for a lot of these design oriented content pieces that, people are just grabbing a hold of because of the nature of the fact that they're stuck in their homes. And so I think that, not just search intent trying to look for new products, but actually home designs, design decor, anything related to how a home is laid out and or the actual design of even a given room. Across the board, we're seeing more traffic, more engagement, more searches happening. And I think if you're not there, like if you're not on those channels, like you've got to double down right now because people are just searching like crazy. It's like the craziest thing that we're monitoring day to day is just how many more people are researching that and trying to maybe build their portfolio of ideas that hopefully, I know we don't know when, but hopefully when this passes, they'll start to transact on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, we don't want to be I guess, irrationally optimistic here because it's really going to depend. Intent will depend on ability to pay for these things on the other side of this. But it certainly is encouraging that folks are at least showing intent right now. And in terms of design, do you think there'll be any lasting impacts in terms of actual home design coming from this?
I don't know. I really don't know. Like we're not seeing any kind of weird changes or spikes in certain types of, different designs that we weren't seeing before because of COVID. We haven't been able to dig into the data that in that kind of way. But I do want to agree with your point. Like we're seeing a lot of increases, but the common question we have around our offices or our virtual office now, right, is like, are people
Yeah.
just bored from Netflix and they're researching products? Like
Yeah.
they're just tired of the new show on Netflix or on television, and that's why they've moved to research. We don't know, but we're
Yeah.
all, I think, hopefully optimistic that that is the case.
Well, I just started season 2 of Altered Carbon, so I've got some viewing. Um, how about in terms? One way I think it might actually have. Tell me if I'm wrong. Is sort of health related products. And I know COVID-19 is having a cleaner home won't necessarily help you avoid the next pandemic. Knock on wood, but it just sort of enhances that thought in folks' mind. Do you think? I don't know, any kind of products related to health or wellness might see an even bigger peak than they have been in the last few years, which has already been a surging sector, I think.
Oh yeah, I was talking to a manufacturer earlier this week, and they have a product. It's interesting. It's like an additive product that goes onto other building materials that helps make the home healthier or cleaner. And certain, it fights against bacteria and things like that. Which, granted, I know COVID-19 is a virus, not bacteria, but
Yeah, yeah,
they are like literally like at production capacity at this point. Like they just can't sell it
yeah,
quick enough because of the demand that they're getting from other manufacturers as well as builders and people of that nature. Um, and so I really believe that this is definitely going to push that narrative quite a bit, just because that this has been such a big deal and in fact impacted so many people. I think it's going to really force product innovation around how to create healthier, cleaner homes in a lot of different ways. And so I'm excited to see what happens from that.
Anything else on before we leave this topic? Anything else on new home? The impact of what you're seeing in the building products world, how it might impact new home builders. Anything that we haven't talked about?
I think how people sell, it's definitely going to change that. Like the thing we're seeing, especially from home builders that are succeeding or continuing to try to push and sell and work with people, is getting more nimble in how they use technology to sell, whether that means virtual meetings like what we're having right now, Dean,
Yeah,
or we're finding different ways to create visualization. I think the builders that are going to succeed are the ones that look at data like we're talking about right now and find different ways to present information and make it so much easier to work with them. I think that's the new currency that we're running into, is the level of ease it is to work with you. The thing we're seeing is that, whether it's a manufacturer, a dealer, or a builder right now, if you have any kind of friction in your buyer process or your buyer journey, it's really being amplified because of how restless people are. So if you can find ways to make it easier for your end customer to engage with you or buy from you, that's going to have impact today, but also post COVID.
okay. Okay. So let's do my favorite part always of these podcasts is the future, your crystal ball. Zach Williams looking into your crystal ball. Let's start with physical showrooms for building products. Are they overrated, underrated? Any changes you see coming up from in that?
I think they're underrated. I know this might not be a popular topic, and granted, I'm in digital. I'm 100%, almost 100% digital. I think people, as we move more online, still are going to crave those in-person experiences. I don't think we're going to run to a point where people want to become Bilbo Baggins and like want to hide in the Shire, like they're just like this. They don't want to come out of their houses. People crave
Good
and
nerd
want.
reference, by the way.
Yeah, oh,
That
thank you.
was
I can't.
one of the best nerd references in the history of this podcast, right there. Very impressive.
The question is,
Sorry.
if you don't get that reference, you probably are judging me because it does sound so nerdy. Um, the I just think that, at least from what we've seen, like in working with manufacturers that do have physical showrooms and do have products out there, people are actually attracted to that more. Like the idea of creating experiences around your brand, I don't believe is going to go away. If anything, I think people are going to be more excited to get out of their homes. So
Yeah.
the real thing though is how do you blend that digital and in showroom experience? And I think the word experience is really critical because traditional retail, like just showing your product is one thing. Creating a Apple, like, Apple, their retail, like that is a total experience. Finding ways to do that is what I think is going to win in the long run.
Okay. Okay. Are there any cost ramifications of that, do you think? Is it going to be, are we going to see more physical showrooms, and will that add transaction costs or anything like that?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know from a, let's say a pure cost standpoint, what kind of impact that's going to have. Granted, yes, it's going to cost more because brick and mortar, having a store, does cost more.
Yeah.
But at least from the manufacturers we have that have some sort of showroom or some sort of dealer that showcases product, it's still a pretty big part of their buyer journey. There's nothing, I mean, seeing it online and seeing it on a website and getting everything specced out, like that's great. But at the end of the day, like actually seeing it in a store or talking to somebody about it, that's a tremendous reassuring point for a lot of purchases, especially when it comes to more expensive products and more expensive homes.
Do you see that? Is there any age? Really, I mean, that's the old, intuitively you think, okay, younger buyers or renters are less likely to need a showroom, and vice versa. Do you see that in your data?
I think so. I mean, if you look at, baby boomers, for example, they are much more comfortable going into a store. They'd almost do that quicker than going online first, whereas millennials and younger start online. I think the data we see is, and I think Google actually released this a couple of years ago, is that 96 or 97% of people start a purchase online, but only 6% finish online, which means a ton of research is starting online. So even if you've got a showroom and that's a big part of how you sell, being the winner and the category leader for your online presence, I think is absolutely critical because it's where a lot of people start their actual research process. And right now it's the only place you can research,
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. In the home buying world, we talk about life stage a lot, and how life stage sort of, maybe it's too strong a word, but sort of dictates your housing preferences as you get older, or as your world changes. You get married, have a family, whatever. Do you think so? So we have millennials and even the generations coming after them being more online, more digital. Will they carry that through even as they get older, or as they get older and have a family, will their behavior change and they'll want to have more physical presence for products? Does that make sense at
I,
all?
I think it does make sense. I think, as I mentioned, the currency that we see, the opportunity we see is all about speed and ease. The easier you make it, the quicker you can deliver. And if there's a experience component to it, I think people will give you their time. The brands and companies that understand how, instantaneous our human nature has become, like I can go online and watch a billion different shows on Netflix today versus like, 20 years ago, you had to wait through commercials. Like my kids, we go to a hotel and there's commercials on television. Like they look at me like we live in a different world. They're like, what is, they're literally pushing the television, like wondering why like a menu doesn't come up, like to fast forward. They're like, why don't you fast forward the commercial, daddy? And I'm like, let me tell you what, kids, this was my childhood, like I think that element and that technology element and bringing technology in a way that helps that experience. I know that that's a loose term, is going to make it easier. But if I look at companies like, and this is a manufacturer, and we don't work with this company, I think what they do is really smart. But if you look at Claire Paint, have you ever heard of those guys?
Yeah.
So they offer, instead of just paint samples, they send you paint stickers. You don't have to get a roller out. You don't have to get, a bucket. You don't have to paint it on your wall. It's literally a sticker that sticks on your wall. You see exactly what it looks like. Like that's a small tweak to the buyer experience that they offer. But I think little ideas like that and little touches like that help improve that journey and set people apart,
Yeah. Yeah. But don't get, I mean, online is still absolutely critical and a growing part of I mean, was there some turning point that made online marketing as critical as it has become that you can remember?
I think it's been a slow progression, but I think COVID is actually going to amplify it because if you think about it, like if I use my sister, for example, she's a teacher, and I actually talked about this on our podcast this past week. She's a teacher. She's in her, her mid-20s. She had to get on a Zoom call this past week with 200 other teachers from her school. And the teachers that have never used Zoom, never used technology in the workplace are now being forced to do it. And so everybody who was reluctant or a laggard when it comes to technology and using it in their daily life is being forced to do it today. And so I think there's going to be a greater acceptance across the board. And companies that have sold and haven't really embraced technology are having to do it. And I really believe that they either need to hold on to that as we come out of COVID. And if they don't, they're going to feel the long-term ramifications of it.
Yeah, that actually makes perfect sense. How about in terms of the future again? 5G. Is 5G going to be a game changer? Will that alter how people market their homes and their building products?
I think it's too soon to know exactly how 5G is going to change things. I do believe that there's going to be technology that comes out that uses 5G that helps either improve, whether it's the actual home or the actual buying process. I think it's going to be really unique. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I'm very excited to see it, but I don't think anybody really knows just because of how early we are in the infancy of that technology.
Yeah, and we might just skip ahead till when Google puts the chip in our brain directly.
Oh yeah, right.
Which is, according to some people, is not that far off.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Google, or speaking of 9 million pound gorillas, how about Amazon and its future role in housing? They're starting to dip their massive toe into those waters in housing and even building products. Do you think how does their presence change over the next, 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of data to support this, but I actually believe Amazon fumbled a bit in the manufacturing, building products, home improvement, space in COVID. If we look at the data on our end, search demand for Lowe's and Home Depot has drastically increased over the last couple of weeks, 20+% for both of those websites. And I think it's because of things that Amazon's done to restrict some product fulfillment and how challenging it's been for them to do some of the things around home improvement. And I really think it's, Home Depot and Lowe's who have been there to capitalize on that, from a broader building product space. I know that may not matter to all the builders out there, but I think there was a really good opportunity that Amazon could have had around building, the building construction space, and to be seen as a strong player and a strong, distributor, if you will, in COVID, but they fumbled. And so do I think they have a long-term, play? Yes. I think they've got enough resources and time and viewership to do it. Just the fact that you can go online, look at tile, and then they're going to try to connect you with a tile expert. They own that whole entire customer journey. I don't think that's going anywhere. I just think they kind of missed out on an opportunity in the midst of this to try to, position themselves even further into this category. And I think to the benefit and, to the planning of Home Depot and Lowe's, who have done a ton to build up their infrastructure and their supply chain, have really capitalized on the moment. Like I had to do this is a couple weeks ago before, everything got locked down. I was in Lowe's. I had to do in-store pickup, and I'm looking around. I'm like, oh my gosh, look how many, there are 1 billion people here. I can't remember the last time that there was this many people in a Lowe's. And I don't think it's directly related to fumbles that Amazon has made, but I think that there's, still somewhat of a sentiment in the building product space that, seeing something in store and getting ideas and talking to people, there's still value there. I don't know if Amazon's going to unearth everything today, but I know that there is, the shift to online and the actual buyer journey process is going to continue to move there for sure.
Yeah. So you think they'll, try again? Even if they miss this opportunity, they'll be there for the next one?
I'd be surprised if they even view it as a lost opportunity, to be quite honest with you. Okay. I think that they've got such strong brand recognition and such strong brand value proposition that they're just going to continue to push that forward. And I think that's good for the industry to try to get on board with technology more. But I think it's also opportunity for builders, dealers, distributors alike to see what they're going to do to help position themselves against that. I don't think you have to just throw up your arms and give up. I think you can look at what makes you unique as a company and fight for that convenience. Because like I said, that's the ultimate currency.
Yeah. It's almost a little bit like the specialty stores versus the large department stores, the Walmarts or something like that. Consumers change. Sometimes they want everything all in one place. That's your Amazon. Sometimes they want someone who really specializes in that product or niche, whatever. And then that's your more specialty store. And it's hard to call Home Depot and Lowe's specialty stores, but compared to Amazon, I guess they.
Yeah, I think there's actually a lot of dealers that are a lot of dealers I know are being really hurt from this, but the ones that come out strong, I think the ones that are fighting for ways to make it easier for people to get products to the job site, whether that means you've got, curbside pickup or we'll deliver to your job site, pushing that message even further. I think not only does that play to that convenience point I just made, But I think people are even more comfortable with that idea because of the social distancing we've had to undertake, So a lot of the dealers we work with that have that component to their business, they haven't really seen much of a blip because they've been able to pivot all of their efforts to, hey, we won't talk to anybody. We won't touch anything. We're going to deliver to your job site and walk away slowly. It's like one of those kinds of messages.
Hands in the air.
Yeah. Hands in the air. And that's that is actually working really well for a lot of people. And so I think being able to move that quickly has been critical for a lot of businesses.
Okay. Hey, Zach, let's end with the ultimate kind of crystal ball question, which is there something that consumers are going to be doing differently in the near future that right now most builders or product manufacturers don't realize?
I'm glad you bring this up. I'm really glad you bring it up because I don't think there's going to be any wide, big, massive change other than the fact that because people are home and they're stuck in their house and they're researching a lot, the level of education that they have around the category, I think, has been accelerated and amplified because they may not be able to close the window today. Where in the past, maybe they've researched for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. All they're doing is researching. So the amount of information that they have at their disposal is massive. And so I really think this means as a builder or a manufacturer, some of the dealer space, knowing that the end homeowner and consumer is going to be even more educated is going to be critical. And to the other point you brought up earlier, Dean, about health and the safety component of a building, I think that message is going to be critical. So being proactive, like one thing we talk a lot about right now is that there's really two strategies people need to have. There's a current COVID strategy and post-COVID. And so thinking about the things that differentiate you now that you can continue to sell, and then what are the things that, people are going to want differently. So maybe they want more privacy because they don't want people, they wanted to be secluded, or maybe they want a healthier, cleaner home because they don't want to deal with these, issues moving forward. I think those are going to be important, but the really crux of it is the amount of education that people have and that they want. It probably feels like a lot to date. I think it's going to be even bigger,
Yeah. So more, I guess, right? More interaction online, more attention to marketing and to interacting with the folks they're buying things from.
Yeah. And I think if you're not trying to win in your category or win in your geographic market, if you're a builder, by having the best content, the best visuals, the easiest to use buying experience, the best social media, which I know we all want those things, but doubling down, I think is going to become even more important because there is going to be more competition. I think that there are companies who are going to try to come out of this who have been positioned to, either they sell direct or they sell modular, or they do, they have different value propositions, are going to try to make a play. And if you have a pre-existing business model that maybe to date might feel antiquated in the midst of COVID, you've got to adapt quickly to be more convenience focused, more consumer focused in that way. Right.
And it's funny, in the new home space, the builders did kind of let their websites and those interaction portals stagnate. But maybe last year or year plus, it seems like they're playing catch up. Some, anyway, are playing catch up pretty rapidly, and they're hitting the online and digital and social media worlds very, very hard. So that makes sense to us too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the amount of people I know who find their builder on social media, it's crazy to think about. People are creating wait lists for certain builders because they build homes and they have a great presence and they work at that part of their business. And I really believe that that's part of the competitive advantage that we're working into, is that it's not the best product that typically wins, it's the best promise. And part of that promise is making sure that you're innovative, you're creative, you're forward thinking in your category or in your geographic market. And I really believe that those are the builders and the manufacturers and dealers and distributors who are going to win.
Perfect. That's a perfect ending. Thank you, Zach. Well, thanks. Thanks for joining us here. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. No, like I said, we started listening to your podcast. Loved it. Had to have you on. So, okay, everyone, thanks for listening, and join us again, please. And probably pretty soon, but we'll see you next time.